Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Conversations on Groong episode. Our guest is the Director for Public Advocacy at Christian Solidarity International, the CSI, Dr. Joel Veldkamp. And he's currently in Yerevan, as the CSI was able to arrange a visit with some Armenian clergy who are presently jailed. Dr. Veldkamp, great to have you back on the Groong podcast.
Great to be here. Thank you both.
Welcome. Welcome, Joel.
So, Dr. Veldkamp, you're in Armenia because you were able to arrange this visit I just mentioned with one of the imprisoned Armenian clergy, Archbishop Bagrat Galsanian. That is great news because last time we talked to you, and I think that was in November, you requested that permission, but you were denied that permission by the government. So what has changed since then?
To be fair to the government, they didn't deny it so much as they sent us a letter with a lot of unhelpful information about how to try again. Way too late for us to do anything about it. But this time we were better in touch with the lawyers for Archbishop Bagrat, and they were able to give us good advice on how to work well with the system, I'll say. And so, yeah, we did have the opportunity to visit Bagrat Archbishop in prison. We have to say the guards were quite friendly to us. We had the impression that they had a good understanding with the Archbishop, and we're very grateful to that we had the opportunity to visit the Archbishop.
That sounds great. Can you tell us what spirit he was in? Because I heard some of the live stream. I have my impressions, but I'd like you to tell us about that.
He was in excellent spirits, and I think I can say this. He's allowed 2 visits per month that aren't with his lawyers, and this was one of those visits. So if I were him, I might be a little, okay, I got to do this, but I'd rather be seeing my family or somebody. But he was so full of good spirit. He was so happy to see us, and I think we were much more encouraged by him than he was by us. I hope we were able to give him some encouragement, but he just exuded positive energy. He said he doesn't regard prison as a hardship because he knows why he's there. He knows what he's doing there. It has meaning for him. It's an honor for him to be in prison because he believes so much in the struggle that brought him there. So he's very confident, has a very good sense of self and why he's there. And yeah, he blessed us. He encouraged us to continue with our own advocacy work for Armenia. And yeah, it was a wonderful encounter.
If you know, the Armenian Apostolic Church actually started from jail as well when King Terdat imprisoned Gregory the Illuminator. So I mean, I don't want to make light of this factor, but I think that taking into account the struggle that we are waging, that the struggle that the Armenian Church is waging and the Armenians are waging, I think that many churchmen would say that they would rather be in jail and suffering with their people rather than be, anywhere else at this point in time.
I mean, the Archbishop spoke about his own diocese, right, which is without an Archbishop right now. He used the word charge d'affaires. I don't know what the Armenian term would be, but there's someone taking care of it for him. But there are all these priests underneath him, all of whom are under pressure from the Armenian government to defect, to join this artificial movement against the Catholicos. And they haven't. They're standing strong. And he was very encouraged by that fact. He also reminded us that currently he's sharing a cell with Archbishop Arshak, but previously he was sharing a cell with Archbishop Mikhail, who, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but he's Archbishop for Shirak Diocese.
Yes.
And the Archbishop reminded us that in the 1930s, during the Soviet Great Terror in Armenia, there were 2 archbishops who were held in the same building where he's being held now. And they were both actually executed there. One of them was named Archbishop Bagrat, who is his namesake. The other was the Archbishop of Shirak.
Yes.
So he sees himself, he's right where he should be, actually, as a leader of the Armenian Church.
Yeah, I was listening to the live stream, and I noted that also he said Archbishop Bagrat Vardazarian, I believe, was executed in those cells in 1937, which is pretty amazing. Your
Yes.
delegation included Eric von Tobel, who is an MP in the Swiss Parliament, and your president, Dr. John Eibner, also. And I did notice that von Tobel said at the end of the meeting, Bagrat Srbazan, who is in very strong spirit, said that in his message that he will fight for Artsakh to the end, and it is not over yet. Can you tell us a little bit about what kind of spiritual and emotional state these jailed clerics are, and what the message is that they want to convey to us?
Well, Archbishop Bagrat, I mean, after we talked for about 5 minutes, and he was, constantly smiling and, very warmly welcomed us. We asked him, "How are you doing? What is your mental state? You don't seem depressed or sad." And he just pointed at the heavens and said, "How can I be depressed? I have a direct connection." So I think it's this assurance that he's doing what he's supposed to be doing, right? And because of that, he knows that the Lord is with him. The Lord will give him strength. Yeah, so it was very encouraging for us. And he told us there is still hope for Artsakh. He still has that hope. That's why he's there. That's why he's in prison.
As we are recording this, February 3rd in Armenia, in Washington, D.C., there is currently a summit going on, the International Religious Freedom Summit. I want to take a step back and paint the scene, because we talked about Archbishop Bagrat, a few of the archbishops, but basically the heads of 3 of the 10 dioceses in Armenia are in jail. Many bishops, many lower ranking clerics are also in detention. They're being constantly surveilled, and other forms of pressure are being applied. You are certainly tracking this. We are trying as best as possible to do that as well. But just last week, the situation seems to be intensifying even more. We have the government launching frivolous cases just so that it can accuse members of the Episcopal Assembly, the high-ranking bishops in Armenia, of crimes in order to prevent their travel, because the Armenian Apostolic Church is forced to hold its assembly, its Episcopal Assembly, in Austria this year, in February. And essentially, this was a move to prevent all of them from traveling to Austria to attend. Amidst this surreal scene, all these attacks against the church, there is an International Religious Freedom Summit, and Armenia is a member of this organization. Now, it started off, in my opinion, I mean, that's an aside, but it started off a little bit in a political manner. It seemed to be mostly oriented towards the Uyghurs in China and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to get your thoughts about the summit, the atmosphere is being held in. Are there any delegates from Armenia, from Armenian organizations in the summit? And I understand that I believe Bagrat Galstyan also prepared a letter to the participants of the summit. Just what your thoughts about this word, international religious freedom, and Armenia being a member of that organization. And there's a summit, and we have most of the church being imprisoned in Armenia or harassed.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, so the IRF Summit is it's not a state-run affair. It's officially an affair where NGOs and independent experts come together to talk about the situation for religious freedom in the world. Since the blockade of Artsakh began in 2022, a lot of Armenian organizations and their friends worked very hard to get this on the agenda of the IRF Summit every year. And in fact, it's quite clear that the government of Armenia wants to take advantage of that new interest in Armenia generated by these efforts. So this time last year, the Prime Minister, Nikol Pashinyan, was in Washington, D.C. for the IRF Summit. About 6 months before he really began his persecution of the Armenian church, but he was there. So this is a venue that the Armenian government is seeking to exploit.
Joel, in fact, I was looking at the list of speakers, and I saw that Aram Vartevanyan, who is the counsel for Samuel Karapetyan, one of the imprisoned Armenian philanthropist who is also a supporter of the church and is actually scheduled to speak there. Do you know if he was able to speak? He's listed as a keynote speaker.
Yes, he was able to speak at the summit, I believe, yesterday. So he did speak on the stage, and he did speak very clearly about the persecution of the Armenian church by the Armenian government. So we're very grateful that he was there. And that's also why we planned this visit when we did. We wanted to try to visit the Archbishop and see if he had a message for the IRF Summit. And indeed he did. He sent a letter addressed to the attendees of the summit where he explained the whole situation for Armenia. So we actually asked him, what would you say to people who care about Armenia, Christian people in the West who care about Armenia, but don't understand quite what's going on between the government and the church? And the first thing he said was, these people need to read better reports. So we're trying to get good information into these people's hands. And we think, that there is a lot of goodwill for Armenia in the Christian world, in the world of international religious freedom. And we're going to try to make them aware.
And besides Mr. Vartavanyan, do you know if there were other speakers who advocated for the Armenian church? I'm aware that there's a Paul Murray. He is the CEO of Save Armenia. And I'm just wondering what was the content of his speech like. I don't know if you followed that or not.
I don't know what he had a very short speech on the stage on the first day, which was very perceptive, I thought, actually, but it was 2 minutes long and he didn't really get into any details. Save Armenia had a special event today, and I don't know what happened there. But Paul Murray is the new CEO of Save Armenia, and they called this event Save Armenia 2.0. So they're launching their new program.
Okay.
So what Save Armenia has done very well is to connect conservative Christians in the U.S. with the existence of Armenia, right? Let's be charitable. Not that many Christians in the U.S. even know very much about Armenia to begin with. So we're grateful for the role they played there. They haven't yet taken a position on the persecution of the church. We would obviously encourage them to, but that's the layout, the landscape as I know it.
Speaking of reports, I believe the foreign minister of Armenia was at the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe a few days ago, and most of the EU MPs have been very silent on what's going on in Armenia over the last year or even before. But Edward Lee, sorry for mispronouncing, he asked a very direct question to the Armenian foreign minister about the persecution of the church in Armenia. And the foreign minister tried to skirt that question. He tried to he tried to change the topic. And then in the end, he closed by saying, there is no, that's only propaganda, or that's only his perception, and that there is no persecution of the church in Armenia. And in fact, the clergy are in jail because they have threatened the heads of state and even himself, that they have threatened the lives. What is your reaction to this? I mean, this is the first time I'm hearing that Arat Mirzoyan, he said, myself, I was also threatened by the church. So is there any truth to that in your opinion?
No. I watched the video of this exchange, and my first thought was, he's hallucinating. It's completely made up. He was talking about, they want to assassinate me, they want to assassinate my colleagues, they want to overthrow the government by force. We're talking about a church here, right? There's no a tank squadron that's going to come into Yerevan captained by these archbishops. They're churchmen. So I was glad that this encounter happened, because the Armenian government has really been getting away with this completely for free until now. And more people are starting to ask questions now, and that's very good. We need more MEPs to pose uncomfortable questions like this to Mirzoyan and others.
Do you think that this will happen again? Do you think that the European MPs are starting to wake up to the situation in Armenia?
I think so. I think um, the the first reaction I get from people normally when I tell them about this is very confusion, right? Like what is this now? What? But then they hear it a second time, and then a third time, and then it's not just me, but it's a member of the European Parliament, or it's a prominent publication in the United States. The cumulative effect is growing, and I think the Armenian government is going to have to answer some tough questions about this quite
Yeah.
soon.
See, there's an EPC meeting, European Political Community meeting in Yerevan in May, all crafted to give Pashinyan the big stage and help him win the elections. But I think it's going to be a very uncomfortable spot for them. So I'm just wondering what can be done to convey this message more effectively to MEPs, and because I think there will be a moment of reckoning, if, for all the pro-Pashinyan Europeans that are trying to, paint him in a good light, in May.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we just need to be really persistent in our messaging. And what I'll tell you is CSI didn't used to get involved in internal Armenian disputes, but that's not really what this is, right? For us, the red line was clergymen are in jail. When that is happening, it's not just a dispute, it's not just a power struggle, this is persecution. And we need to really underline that. And also underline that Pashinyan wants to take over control of the church. He's quite open about it, that he intends to use the power of the state to force the duly chosen head of the worldwide Armenian church out of his office to be replaced by someone who will be under his influence. That's the program. And it's completely indisputable.
Dr. Veldkamp, I
Right.
want to continue on the track of the European MPs for a second. You seem to indicate that they are not terribly well informed. Sometimes they hear about this. I mean, I don't blame anybody because they're all busy with their own constituencies and everything. Does this mean that there's a role here for the Armenian diaspora in those communities to tell their representatives what is going on and inform them a little bit about the real situation on the ground in Armenia, especially if those MPs are going to be in Yerevan in May?
Absolutely, absolutely. And we're doing our part, and we recognize it's that the Armenian people deserve more solidarity than they're getting. But whatever the diaspora can do to help is really important. And I'll share one thing that the Archbishop shared with us today, which is that part of, or one aspect of the campaign against the church, the goal here is to transform the church from being the church of the nation to the church of the state.
Right.
Being the Armenian Apostolic Church to the Church of Armenia. And meaning the connection between the church and the diaspora will be severed, right? It will no longer be a worldwide church. It will be a small church under the control of the Armenian state. And he used these words. He said, the church has been the axis of the diaspora. The Archbishop speaks English excellently, by the way.
Absolutely.
And it's true. As far, I'm not non-Armenian, but as far as I understand, this is a threat to the diaspora, and the diaspora needs to start acting like it.
I do think there's more work that needs to be done in terms of the advocacy, and it's really important. But I just want to read a tweet made on behalf of the Archbishop right now. He said, "To the Parliamentary Assembly report, I have read the passage in your report regarding the countries under a full monitoring procedure concerning Armenia. I wish you the same democracy in your countries as we have in Armenia." I think that was
Bit of a backhanded wish there.
backhanded wish. There's definitely more work to be done in terms of EU advocacy, and this is, I think, a good chance for all organizations. And I do want to thank the CSI as well for your leading this effort. Really, I mean, because so far you're I can say you stand alone in terms of religious organizations who have paid heed to this calling and recognize the persecution that the Armenian church is facing. So very appreciated.
I also want to express my thanks to the CSI Dr. Veldkamp, Dr. Eibner, everybody's doing a wonderful job. You guys are also an axis of faith in our communities.
You're very kind. If I could take an opportunity to express my thanks to the Armenian human rights groups here in Yerevan that are really making all of our work possible. It's been largely unnoticed, but civil society here has not been silent. They've been putting out joint statements, especially in October and December, about the persecution of the church that are extremely clear, calling Archbishop Mikhail Ajapahian a political prisoner, laying out in detail how the Armenian government is violating political liberties and civil liberties in a way that threatens all Armenian citizens.
Yeah.
And our work has been especially facilitated by the Armenian Center for Political Rights. This is a fantastic organization, a group of young lawyers. They know these issues inside and out. They produce an excellent report in both Armenian and English, which we're trying to post on our social media pages and our website as often as we can because we think everyone should read it. But we're really, really grateful to this group for all that they've done for the imprisoned clergy and have done to help us get our way around this issue. I just want to make that clear.
I want to amplify that thought because we talked to Rafael Ishkhanian, who was also on the live stream video from the ACPR, the Center for Political Rights. So thank you for that. Yeah.
Yeah. And in fact, if I can just add something, one of the phenomena that happened over the last 5 years when, we thought that Armenia had a civil society, but it was all like funded from the West and all these like three-letter agencies funding our NGOs. And then when Pashinyan came to power, all of them remained silent. And when you mention civil society, I want to say the real civil society, because ACPR, the Armenian Center for Political Rights, is part of the real civil society, and they're doing this all essentially pro bono, at the expense of their families, at the expense of their sleep and their, nerves, and without any real funding from anywhere. So yes, we definitely truly appreciate the work. And one of the, I guess, good sides of this phenomenon has been that some, real civil society in Armenia is being created as part of this, Pashinyan's, power coup in Armenia.
In addition to what you said, this work is not without risk. There have been lawyers of the clergy who have been arrested for doing this work. There have been podcasters who have been arrested for using the wrong words. There's surveillance is real. Police harassment is real. They're being very, very brave in taking the stand for the church, in addition to doing pro bono work and losing sleep. And we have just so much respect for them.
Great.
I get to fly out to Switzerland tomorrow, but they're staying here. They're not leaving.
All right. Have a safe trip, Joel. And thanks again for joining us. And thank you for the great work you do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hovik. Thank you, Asbed.
That's our show today. The episode was recorded on February 3rd, 2026. We've been talking with Dr. Joel Veldkamp, Director for Public Advocacy at Christian Solidarity International. He also serves as CSI's representative to the United Nations in Geneva. Since 2020, he has been at the forefront of the CSI's advocacy efforts for the Armenians of Artsakh, Nagorno-Karabakh. He holds a PhD in international history from the Geneva Graduate Institute for his thesis on the Armenian and Arabic-speaking Christians of Aleppo during the French Mandate. For more information, you can head to podcasts.groong.org/episode number and check out the links. We'll try to put all of the referred organization links and article links as well.
All right, folks. Don't forget to comment, like, share, subscribe. Help us get in front of more eyes, and we appreciate you staying with us. I'm Hovik Manucharyan from Occupied Yerevan.
I'm Asbed Bedrossian in Glendale, Los Angeles. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Have a great day.